Today I'm going to show you how I made this really cool oaken Shou Sugi style pot. I started out by gluing the two pieces of wood together. I used oak for the bottom panel and the top panel and sandwiched two pieces of ash in the middle. I then cut the corners of the blank off, which left me with an octagonal blank. As you can see, I tried a bit of the sunset finish and was really happy with how it looked. This video that you're seeing I didn't have a bench grinder for, so the tools weren't as sharp as they should be, which made this rather challenging to turn. Hence why I actually turned this about 3 months ago, but the video is only coming out now. I started out by roughing it to round, which took a long time, but I got there in the end. I primarily used my round scraper to turn this blank to round, although you could of course use other tools as well, such as a roughing gouge. Here you can see I had finally got it to the shape I wanted. I didn't film this part as I thought it was fairly self-explanatory how to turn a profile that you're happy with. As you can see here, I'm just pointing out the raised surface in it. I really liked the aesthetics of this bowl and especially the form to it. I've been reading a lot recently about forms for bowls and things, and I think it really helped when I was developing this bowl, or pot. I then used my blowtorch to torch the outside of the bowl. I was using a chef's blowtorch, which works perfectly well for doing this, although you could of course use a more industrial style one. If you click up at the top, I'll leave a link to the video where I actually did some more Shou Sugi style finishing. That video covers a lot more in-depth guides to how to do this, as I discussed the history of Shou Sugi finish a bit more than this video does. As I previously discussed, this video was a lot quicker once I bought the new bench grinder, and that's why there's been such a delay with this video. I then sanded from 240 grit through to 400 grit, as there was no need to go any lower, otherwise it would take all of this Shou Sugi style finish away. I then started to apply my sunset style finish. This was just a mixture of red and yellow dye, and done in a special pattern to recreate a sunset. I mixed this dye to be a very strong concentration, as I still wanted it to show through the blackness of the Shou Sugi finish. I started out by randomly covering the top with this yellow dye, and just sometimes going a bit further towards the bottom of the pot to make a very random sort of finish. As you can see, I'm just turning the bowl using the faceplate, as this allows me to get a much more even coverage of dye. And it will drip a bit onto your lathe bed, which I hadn't realised at the time, so I would suggest either putting a piece of kitchen roll on top of your lathe bed or using a scrap piece of wood, which in future videos I now do. I then mixed up an equally strong concentration of red dye and just randomly put that all over the bottom of the pot and then moved it up across the yellow so it made an orange middle section. As you can see, I'm just adding lots of layers, randomly covering some sections at the top, as you can see me doing just here. And this created a really nice finish, and I thought it looked really cool. Obviously when you apply wax it will look even better, as you get more of a gloss finish, and it also brings out the colour of the black Shou Sugi style finish and also the wood grain coming through from all of that dye. I then rubbed the yellow dye over the whole of the Shou Sugi style bowl, as this made a really good sunset finish and just added a bit more colour and contrast to the bowl. It's up to you whether you interpret this to be a bowl or a pot. I sort of use the words interchangeably for this, but it is more of a pot to be honest. I then applied Woodturner's blend to the outside and buffed it, before moving on to hollowing the inside of the bowl. I used my sharp round scraper, as I now had my bench grinder to hollow this, and this took barely any time at all. I still think it took about an hour, but this was when I had just started turning bowls to be honest, and I hadn't done that many. I know this is coming out when I've turned quite a lot of bowls, but as I have previously discussed, this is an old video. But it was quite good, and as you've just seen from that clip there, you can see the line where the two pieces of ash were glued together. There must have been a little bit of glue that squeezed out and didn't quite clamp it together properly, which isn't the end of the world because after hollowing through it you didn't even notice it. And especially with all the Woodturner's blend applied over the top, it did help fill a couple of those little marks. I checked the depth constantly using my steel rule and my wooden ruler before sanding from 120 grit all the way up to 400 grit and using a piece of kitchen roll just to remove any of the sawdust. I then applied one layer of Chestnut Products Food Safe Finish before trying to part it from the faceplate. I used my tenon saw to do this after taking the screws out of the faceplate, but then this was where some of the problems started to arise, as you'll start to see now. I tried to remove this little extra bit where I hadn't quite cut it close enough to the face of the bowl, and I thought trying a jam chuck would be a fantastic idea, but I decided to use the faceplate, and as you can see, it flung off and cracked. Which wasn't the end of the world, I super glued it on, but this is just more of a thing to say, be careful using a jam chuck. This isn't a jam chuck, as I've now realised that was a really dangerous way to have tried to do it, and I'm going to be making a proper jam chuck and actually understanding how it works so I don't cause stuff to fly off the lathe. As you can see, it did sort of leave a bit of a weird finish, so I sanded it so it's nice and flat. The advantage of using super glue is it's so thin it easily fills the crack, and I don't even notice where it is now. I then cut some lavender down so it looked nice, and then here's some photos of how it turned out. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to share it around. Thanks for watching.